Meeting of the Campus Reconfiguration Committee to order. I ask the clerk to take a roll.
Carroll. Here. Brewer. Glassmer.
Here.
Turk.
Here.
Frank. Here. Williamson. Absent. You have 4 of 7 present.
Okay. And are we in compliance with the open meetings law?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the meeting is properly noticed.
Very good. We have a 12-point agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Frank, second by Carol to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And we have minutes from our last meeting on November 6th. Anybody have corrections, changes needed to those minutes? Hearing none, I will declare those minutes to be approved. Item 6, public comment. Do we have anybody from the public who would like to comment to the committee tonight? When here in person or online?
Dean has his hand raised. I don't know. He needs something. There was nothing in the chat, but
Okay.
from us.
Unmute him and see.
Dean, I see your hand raised. Did you want to speak?
Chat, so.
Okay. Well, we'll move on. Item 7 is reports. An update on the winterization of campus buildings.
Are we? Oh, yeah. Yes. Hello. We've got Venture Architects and Ring and Du Chateau on the meeting. Thank you again, especially in light of the upcoming Wintergeddon that's coming, to be so very accommodating to have us be able to present this virtually. We do want to thank you for that. So from the Venture Architects team right now, it is myself, Kyle Knope, project manager. I'll pass it off to my other colleagues here in the room.
Corey Meyer, principal in charge.
And Brian Nelson, principal designer.
And then with Ring and Du Chateau representing us, we have R.D. Ruffin. R.D., you can introduce yourself.
Yep, R.D. Ruffin, project manager and plumbing engineer with Ring and Du Chateau. I am also representing the HVAC team and the electrical team as well, since unfortunately both of Steve and Kirk had prior commitments. But I did talk with them prior to the meeting, so I do have some updates that we can review once we get moving.
Okay, and then with that, we can have RD give us the update on the winterization of the campus buildings. From the last meeting 2 weeks ago, we had talked about we had identified a couple of questions that were out there. One was the need for a controls expert that would be able to help out on the science building because of the building automation system that's in there and the critical infrastructure that's a part of that. And as RD had said, Kirk would be the one who would be speaking to that. He is not able to be a part of the meeting. RD can speak to it a little bit more. He did share some of that information with Candace and Randy in terms of an option for that. So I'll let RD speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, we reached out to a couple of our contractors that we work with quite a bit. Some are in the Milwaukee, some are in the Madison area. And one that we work with quite a bit is ICAM, and that's who Kirk connected with earlier this week. And they did send us some information. They do have a control person that has worked with Honeywell and that vintage of Honeywell system on the control side in the science building. So unfortunately, that person is on vacation this week, so we can't connect with them this week. But once he's back, we can talk with him and see what we would need to do to help at least get the science building to where we can provide some additional control and get the system set back so they're not at a standard temperature for a building. We can back things down, but only to a point where that IT infrastructure won't be impacted. So we may need a little bit of input on that, but we do have a line on a controls contractor, and we're still following up with a couple other guys. So Candace, I think you saw all that information. I'm not sure if you shared it yet, but that's where we're at with that, with the controls on the science building right now.
Yep, we did see that, and Randy, I know, has had some correspondence with Kirk as well. And we've got our IT involved, so we're all kind of working together to try to get it figured out and get to the solution. And I said today, we've waited this long, one more week is not gonna kill us, so.
And we do have heat in there.
Fair enough.
It's not a major issue as long as we've got heat operational.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of getting it down to the temperatures where we want to. So it's not run 70 degrees, it would be down to 50 or 45, whatever.
Right.
So nothing freezes up.
Okay.
And then RD, did you, could you please provide the committee an update relative, from Steve on the electrical side relative to the winterization and the relationship with the fire alarm systems in there?
Sure. So for on the electrical side, there is no concern. Like if we're going to permanently close a building, there's no issue with the electrical side. You could even call We Energies and disconnect the services for those buildings if you wanted to, but you could shut down the primary service to those buildings without any adverse effects to the system. That being said, if you want to, in some of the other buildings where you have fire alarm and you still want to keep those buildings up and running at a minimum, you could leave the fire alarm system energized. You still need to leave the service energized, but everything else you could shut down that doesn't impact the heating and cooling system for the building. So based on the last meeting on the 6th, the discussion was that the education building and the library building would be essentially permanently closed. So those you could completely de-energize. The rest of the buildings, again, aside from Melville Hall, which will still need to operate at a normal condition because of you still have occupants working in the building. The other buildings could be brought down to a lower temperature, and you could again trip or shut off the disconnects for any of the non-essential items, and you could just leave the fire alarm active. And that way, if there wasn't an issue, it would trip the fire alarm system, and you'd be notified. So that's kind of the update on electrical. It's similar to HVAC and plumbing, but I think it's probably the easiest of all of the three, because if you're shutting the buildings down, you can de-energize the panels, and you're all set. Any questions on that?
Yeah, so you said the fire alarm, there's no water in that, that's just detectors, right?
Correct, yep.
So where is that responding to? If the alarm goes off, who's getting the message?
That's an excellent question, and I should have followed up with Steve on that. I'm not exactly sure. I don't know, Randy, if you know, and maybe Randy's not in there. But I will follow up with Steve and see what is notified. I thought it went back to a head-end system, but I could be wrong. So let me follow up and clarify with Steve on that to see where the fire alarm would notify in case there was an event that you guys would have to be aware of.
Well, but we don't know if when UW left, if that's going to their central communication center. That might still be.
And that could be the case.
Right. And I guess the other question is, do we know that panel even works?
You mean like the power panel?
No, the fire panels.
When we went through the buildings, yeah, I believe Steve looked at all of them to make sure that they were powered and appeared to be functioning correctly.
Okay.
I mean, again, we didn't test any of the pull stations or anything like that, but
All right.
what we did walk through in the buildings, it did appear to be working properly.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Carroll first, then we have a question online too.
I just wondered if
Randy needs any help with de-energizing and making sure that the fire system stays energized. You're good with that?
I would prefer to have an electrician come with me to shut those breaker boxes down and shut only the ones that are needed, because I don't want to shut something down that it's feeding back from somewhere else. I prefer to have somebody that knows electrical, that
Would
would,
Precision do that or somebody else?
what's that?
Like Precision or who?
I'm sure he probably could, but if he doesn't know the system either, that's the other thing. I could check with previous employee from out there, Everett Newberry. He might know that better than anybody, as far as, he knows those systems and he was there for 17, 20 years or whatever it was. Think that he would know. I could ask him. I'm related to him, so I
Thanksgiving discussion?
maybe. So that's a possibility.
And Barb has a question online, it looks like.
I was just wondering if those systems are calling out. I know UW took out all their phone lines. So is there supposed to be a phone line associated with that, those fire alarm systems? Because I don't think there are any left there.
That's why I think it would be a good test to just notify the fire department and go out and pull an alarm just to see
Start
if
building
anybody
all
gets,
information.
if anybody gets notified from that, from one of those buildings. I mean, we could let the sheriff's department and city and fire department know that if one gets pulled, see if it goes anywhere.
Well, the alarm panels have communicators on them. The
Right.
communicator will tell you what format it's being sent in, whether it's over a phone line or whether they're trying to do it over an Ethernet or a web connection or something. So that would be the point to identify. I would think first to know what type of communication, but I would agree with Barb. It probably goes to UW central system and that phone line's dead, so it's gonna dial nothing, my guess.
And we have the equipment to put on those lines and test if they're active lines. I mean, we can put our butt sets on them and tell.
So if we find out the alarms aren't actually going anywhere, does that have bearing on us continuing to use Melville Hall with a non-functioning alarm system?
Well, and then the question comes up, if it's a dial system, then we just have to get a dial pair to it, and away you go. Whether you do that, however you do that, there's different ways to manage that.
Any other questions? Mr. Manning?
In your mind, are any one of them buildings just too far gone to make sense to try to do anything with?
And asking that question to our team, correct?
Yeah, and we did kind of talk a little bit about that last time we met, but if you could refresh
Yep.
us.
Yeah, I think leading that list would be the Arts and Education Building, which is Building B. That is the one that is furthest northeast on the campus, and that is just due to a combination of many years of deferred maintenance projects on that. There's some apparent moisture getting in underneath the slab, which is creating moisture in the slab, which is creating some floor tile delamination. There's a major deal of accessibility issues in that building that would need to be brought up to current day standards. And actually, because the state of Wisconsin has not adopted the most recent IBC and ADA code, we as a profession or as a firm, we would be recommending that be brought up to the 2021 standards, even though that's not been adopted by the state of Wisconsin, just so you are up to date with all of that. So that building would need a significant amount of enhancements on the accessibility side. There's just mechanically, it's past end of life. It needs a full-on window replacement. There's a number of doors that are deteriorating. This is, and all of this is applicable to most of the buildings on the campus. That It's just that with building B, that arts and education building, it's just that much further down the path. Now that one could say, hey, they were having classes in there, just up to a couple of years ago, and they were. And from how it appeared is that they just were avoiding the areas where all the tiles were cracking and everything. And I think they were making do with the space they had, but it is not a space that you would want to put anybody in the future as a, hey, this is an upgraded option from what we used to have. There is no upgrade with that building for any user to go in there. So we would put building B at the top of that list. Then sort of the next tier in that list are the buildings that are highly functional or not functional, highly specialized in their function that aren't in alignment with county uses. And that list of buildings would be building A, which is the science building. And while that is the most recently renovated building, that building unfortunately has all of the new lab features that are in there, the lab surfaces, the fume hoods. It's great if the county was looking to get into the lab business or the or the science education business. And to reuse a lot of that would be a fairly major renovation cost that's associated with that. Now, part of that building was brought up in the 2000 edition. Part of that building was brought up to meet ADA standards, but there's another part of that building, the original part of it, that still lagged behind with that. They were able to meet compliance with the addition. So you would want all of those features brought up. And that too, that building, there's tuck pointing issues, there's the windows, the equipment in there, even though it's a 2000 edition, that equipment, the mechanical equipment, boilers and everything like that, they're going to be 25 years old. And that is really close to near end of life for many of those units. So that would be in that second tier of probably not applicable to reuse. Together with that would be the building E, which is the cafeteria theater building where the Copper Top is, the Roadrunner Cafe. Again, that the good east part of that building, it's music rehearsal rooms, music practice rooms, the theater, the back of stage, all of that. If you were to build a theater today, it would have a lot more of the different enhancements than that current theater is there. And a lot of that has to do with accessibility to the seating, accessibility through the doors, the clearances that are there. To reuse that as a theater would be requiring a great deal of renovation to the existing space that would require addition to the building. You'd be adding on to make more room in order to get those clearances you'd need from an accessibility standpoint. The kitchen, the commercial kitchen that was in there for the cafe, it's serviceable. The equipment is still in fair condition. There might be value there for the county to resell, or maybe relocate to another facility that has a need for cooking equipment that the county owns. So there is some possibility there. That would be building E. Building F is the gymnasium. Just in its name, that building is solely functional as a gymnasium and a maintenance facility. And as a gymnasium, it has some limitations. We identified in our report that we had shared that just like for instance, the showers, they're the communal showers, the ones that many of us grew up having anxiety over, right? Where you just get that tree shower stand in the middle and we all go in there. Now it's much more of a compartmentalized shower type design layout for that. So there would be some pretty significant changes that would happen in the locker room and shower area. and replacement of all of the lockers. There was deterioration on a number of the lockers. And that building as well has a number of accessibility issues. We had the other part with that building is just the square footage of it. It's about 20,000 square feet. So you just have that much more things and space of stuff that you have to repair or replace. So when you think of that, you can have like a small 8,000 square foot classroom building, and you can maybe manage the replacement of a roof on that. When you get to 20,000 square feet on the gymnasium, that becomes a pretty costly initiative to do a roof replacement on there. So in that case, the costs go up quite a bit higher for both renovation and replacement for that building. Now, that being said, I think our team, we've talked internally quite a bit, and that doesn't mean that a gymnasium function isn't appropriate for Richland County or even Richland Center. And in one of those sort of ideas that we had was, what if, for say with the gymnasium, that whole floor, that wonderful athletic floor gets pulled up by an expert athletic floor contractor, gets refinished and saved. And then maybe if the school district, or if there's an addition that's part of the Simon Center, or just some idea of maybe it's a sports performance center that is a nonprofit or privately run, that floor could be brought back to life in your community, and it would be sparkling as great as it had ever been, and all of those memories that are there can still be a part of that new space without having to struggle with the maintenance of a 60-year-old building. So those are just some of the ideas that, when we say that it may not be the cost benefit analysis of renovating that building may not turn out to say that we should renovate that. That doesn't mean that a lot of those memories that so many people have collected in that space couldn't still be perpetuated with a floor in a new space. So that is much more highly functional and much better suited for the activities that would be happening in there. So that's that next tier. That's building E, gymnasium, theater, cafeteria, and the science building. That next tier then would be building C, the library, and building D, Melville Hall. The library is much wider open floor plate, so has a lot more options there for reuse. The major issue with the library building is the fact that the bathrooms are very tightly positioned in that southwest corner, and are not, have no real, they have some pretty severe accessibility issues with it in terms of clearances when you enter into those bathrooms, and then the space within for turning radiuses and appropriate toilet partition sizes. To get that space, you would literally have to put on a small addition on the southwest corner of that building just to make those bathrooms accessible for any kind of reuse in that building. So if you were to invest that much money into that building, then you also are then presuming you're investing a lot of money and capital into window replacement, mechanical replacement, which would be significant as well. And even at that, then you are still working within a renovated 60-year-old building. So while the windows might be much more energy efficient, those windows might be more energy efficient than the masonry brick wall that is just beside it, because the insulation that's in there, if there is insulation in there anymore, then it could just have been deteriorated due to water damage that, without going in some level of destructive demolition to investigate that, we wouldn't be able to say. So there's some troubles in terms of reuse of the library. That leaves us with Melville Hall. Melville Hall, currently the extension office is in there. It's operating well. The addition that was put on in '97, the offices that are there are much more in alignment with today's standards relative to sizes and that. Good conference size area. Those bathrooms need minor accessibility upgrades, but they are accessible, which is a benefit. There's just a lot of clearance issues in the original part of Melville Hall, i.e. width between doors and door sizes that would need to really be modified if future long-term use of that building were to continue. The other part from a functional standpoint is those offices that are in Melville, the original building of Melville Hall are pretty small offices. Those are like maybe 10 by 10 offices for the instructors. And today we would probably be going with roughly a 10 by 12 square foot office, 120 square feet. So when you start adding that kind of space into that footprint that's in Melville Hall around the donut, because there's the courtyard, you kind of lose that double loaded corridor. And now you have it becomes a pretty major renovation to get regular offices in there. If your users are okay with a 10 by 10 office, then it's just swapping out some doors. The equipment is newer for most of the things considered on campus. And then it could be a good swing space for departments if other projects were going on that the county would have available to use to be able to move people out to the campus for a temporary time. So that's the state of affairs with the buildings at the campus.
Trying to refine my question a little more. Are there any of the
Oh
buildings
boy.
so far gone that it just doesn't, we're talking about lowering the heat and all this. Are there any that even make sense to heat them at all?
Well, yes. And as RD had identified in our last meeting, we had identified that both Building B and the library were likely not, from a functional standpoint, not really targeted for any future use for the county, and any infrastructure that would be in there would likely not. It would not be detrimental if those were just fully shut down. So those, I think we identified that could happen too. The science building, Building A, that one we've got to keep open and operational. And that's just because of the sensitive infrastructure, both IT infrastructure that's in there that will need to be maintained over the winter at a conditioned level, maybe not a comfortable level, but just at a conditioned level. That leaves us with the gymnasium and we'll definitely keep Melville Hall operational with the extension office in there. That leaves Building E, the theater, and then Building G, or Building F, the gymnasium. As to, do you keep those conditioned? Now those are the two biggest buildings on campus, and that's a lot of space to be keeping at a low temperature. And I think we would like some feedback from the committee to understand if there is any future possible reuse that the county would see in those two somewhat highly specialized buildings.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank.
So Melville Hall has got an old side and a new side. Do we know if those are zoned separately, that part of that could be shut down to a minimum and the other half could be kept at a more comfortable level for the offices? Because I know it's two separate buildings with an add-on, if I remember correctly.
I see RD nodding his head, trying to remember that. And I know when we were up on the roof, it has two separate mechanical equipment areas. There's rooftop units on the new addition, and those, I'd have to go back and look, and this is me talking as an architect. I should let the mechanical engineer talk, that like, speaking outside of course here, but there are separate units that are on the original building. Is that correct, Artie?
Yeah, there are, and I believe that, so the HVAC side, I believe that is correct. That the units on the new serve the new, and the units on the old serve the old. I will confirm that with Kirk just to make sure. Plumbing wise, it's similar. There's a heater on either side, and so the new kind of serves the new, and the old serves the old. Electrical would be the only one that I'm not 100% sure on. I don't know if the service that was on the original building was large enough to accommodate the addition. So that one might be a little different, but again, maybe that doesn't matter as much because you're going to need to keep power to the building anyway. Depending on how it's served. But yeah, we can confirm that and make sure. But there could be an opportunity there. One question I would have on that is, say we wanted to shut down part of that building. We're not talking about like permanently shutting down, like the HVAC units totally shut off. We would just back them down to a temperate level that's, let's say 50 degrees as a round number. Or was the thought to totally shut it down?
No, the thought was to bring the part that's not used down to a minimum temperature.
Sure.
Why heat the whole building when we know it's already a split building? Let's just heat the part that we use and the other part bring it down to a minimum.
The hard part is there's no way to close it off. It's all big and open. So we have to build something to contain that colder temperature in that one area and keep the heat in the other area, because it's just a big open circle.
So,
With one hallway down the middle. So it's not, there's not doors that separate one.
I was just out there the other day, and that was their complaint, was because they're all on the older side right now, the QW extension is. And their complaint was that they could feel the cold air coming down from the other end, because we have that one turned way down. And they're feeling it coming down the hallway already. And they're like, well, we're gonna go down and turn up, it needs to be at 68 because we can feel it. That's like, well, then they're defeating our purpose of shutting half down and the lower temperature and heating at 70 at the other end, because they're just gonna turn it up. They're gonna say, well, if it's cold, I'm gonna turn it up to 75. And then you're just fighting the systems from one end to the other. Because all the
And Randy, the other challenge with that too is the fact that that new addition, it's actually the bathrooms that I think the way they were, that doesn't have any restrooms in the new addition. And the way that they were able to, at the time, get that to comply was by making the restroom renovations in the original building and expand. And that's why when they did that, they expanded those restrooms, making them more ADA compliant. So if you were to say, hey, let's go with the newest of the buildings and close down the older portion of that building, you would still need to go over into the original building in order to access the restrooms.
At the end that they're in?
They're in the middle, so the bathrooms
Yeah,
are
right. But that is actually part of the original building.
Right, the bathrooms are in the original building, but that hallway that's what splits the new and the old, is that bathroom, that hallway.
You said they were in there.
Closing that off for.
They are, but they're on that wall, but then they put the hallway down the middle, and then the new building starts.
Mr. Carroll.
Okay, heat the whole building.
So I guess for direction on this, in my looking at this, I would say building B and C get shut down. Total shutdown,
Be the classroom building in the library.
classroom and library, unplug them, keep the fire alarm active if it is, because if it does any good, I guess, find out. The Wallace, B then, which is Melville Hall, I would really like to see if there's any way we can split that. I don't know if we can put barriers up so that side doesn't drift cold air through. I don't know. I haven't been out there to see if that
So that was last
insulation
week.
board, I don't know.
Construction zones, I mean, they'll do that. They'll put up just heavy
Pretty.
plastic. I mean, it's better than nothing.
How many panels, yeah, how many sound panels are there for the choir thing in the auditorium there that would roll on rollers that you could, I don't know.
Actually, it's only 8 feet
There you go,
tall.
Bob. Let's think outside the box.
We're only talking 8 feet by 4 feet to get in the hallway, because that's all you gotta shut down.
Yeah, couldn't you just
Yeah,
tack?
both
Well, my
sides.
question was, do they have to access that other side at all, or can they
No.
access?
No.
Okay, well, then in that case.
No,
why
they don't
didn't we do that?
need to be on that other side at all, on the west side. There's no reason to be over there if they're just gonna use the.
Constructed
the
like a
old side.
temporary wall or even put a door in it or something.
Yeah. So I would be very interested in seeing that for the Wallace Student Center. There's a lot of stuff in there yet. There's pianos, there's instruments, I don't know how, unless we're gonna move everything out of there, we can completely shut that down. But I'd like to see that go to a minimum and then go through and shut all the breakers off that aren't being used for anything.
I currently have the copper top. I set all the buildings at 50 right now, except for Melville. And then, of course, the science building with that issue we're having over there. The other buildings are set at 50. I went through and set all the thermostats and just did that this past week. So
Sounds like we're on track with that, but if we wanted to pursue further, it would be taking classroom building and library down to being shut out.
I think so.
And thinking about it, Randy, there are doors in the student center that close, that go from the student center down the hallways towards the theater.
they're already closed.
So but is that able to be sectioned off too, where one area is cooler than another?
I'd have to look at the thermostats, because I think there's thermostats in all those hallways going into the theater. There's 2 in the back of the theater, and then there's one on each hallway, if I remember right, between the seating in the copper top theater and the kitchen or the dining area, whatever you want to
So
call
I'm
it.
just thinking that internal area where the pianos and those things are, okay, that had to be set a little bit warmer, but the theater doesn't necessarily have to be.
Those
And
are already turned down
the
to 50.
open area, where there's nothing, but maybe the kitchen. I'm just thinking, maybe there's a way along Bob's thought.
There's nothing saying that stuff couldn't all be moved into the cafeteria area, like those pianos and stuff. So they're all in one area where it's warm. And then cool the rest of it down.
Right.
Sure, there you go.
So,
Yeah, I think that's a great. And then I guess my thought on F, which is the gym, I don't want to lose that floor. There's too much good use that couldn't come out of that. We
Right.
shut that down, that floor is gonna go toast right away.
and they just
gotta be a
redid it in
minimum.
April. They just redid it in
That-
April.
There's too much good potential there. We don't know what that is yet, but it's too much of a valuable space.
And there have been discussions about possible uses of that space.
Yeah, I don't want to see that go
Right.
away. So I guess that's my short take on it.
Anybody else on the committee have other thoughts in addition to that?
Well, I was wondering about the water. Early on at this, I asked a question about shutting down some of them. They said, well, all the water has to circulate through all the buildings.
No, not sure. We found that out last
I
time.
found out that's not true. All right, that was my concern. We shut down 2 or 3 buildings. What do we do about the rest?
Right. Mr. Carroll?
So what do we do to get Randy help with electrician?
Well, you know who you wanna.
Yeah, I can just get a hold of Ashby. I'll just grab one of the guys and I'll take care of that. And they can look at it and see what can be shut down on those 2 buildings, and they can tell me.
Just, be mindful of what they told us at the last meeting. That decision to shut those buildings down is, we're pretty much writing them off.
Yeah, I just need the okay to go ahead and do that, and then, as far as the water in the classroom building and the library, we will have to do, if they're gonna be shut down, we're gonna have to do curb stop shut-offs. Because I saw there was a note on one that said at least by the main shut-off inside the building. So we have to shut off at the curb stops, and then I will have to, well, I guess we won't have to blow the water out if you don't think we should. I mean, I can try to blow the lines out. I can take the main apart from inside the building where the meter's at. Do you think it needs to be blown out, going to the bathrooms and stuff, as the best we can?
So
Turn all the faucets on and,
I would defer to.
About our online folks, do you have guidance for us on that?
yeah, so I think you're right on, Randy, by shutting off the water at the curb stop. That would be my recommendation as well. And then if you all are in agreement that those buildings are not going to be viable options in the future for anything, and you essentially want to permanently close those, I would drain the water as best you can and then call it good. I don't think you necessarily have to blow it all out because, again, you're not going to ever use those buildings. So if a pipe cracks or something like that happens, it's in an abandoned building essentially. So ideally, if there was any thought to reuse those buildings in any way, I would recommend blowing the water out as much as possible. You could still run into a freeze thaw where you could crack a pipe because you couldn't get all the water out, but I would say you do the best you can, drain the system as much as you can, and then if they're a loss, if those buildings are abandoned, then I wouldn't put a lot of extra effort into it. Again, that also goes on the sanitary side. So when that water dries out, there's going to be sewer gas that's leaking back into the building. So there's opportunities there to do some things where you can, aside from water, put different chemicals and things in the traps that don't dry out as quickly. So you'd have a much longer time before anything would dry out and you'd have that sewer gas back up. You could also take fixtures off the walls and cap things. That's another option. Again, that's a lot more work, but it is an option that you could utilize to help minimize that sewer gas backup. To me, those are the two biggest ones. Electrically, shut it down, power down the panels. And then HVAC wise, yeah, same thing. Those are all furnaces in those buildings, so you can just turn them off.
Steve, go ahead.
So who's gonna coordinate the fire alarm test? Who's doing that?
The fire alarm test, Randy, we'll just have to work with Scott Gold and.
yeah, we'll have to figure something out there. I'll get hold of Scott and city and county, and I'll talk to them, and
Yeah.
we'll have to try to do a test and see where they go anywhere or not.
Well, give me a call, I'll look at the panel. Okay, I can tell you what kind of service it is.
See if you remember, and then we'll talk.
Done.
Mr. Gill.
So let's just say we permanently shut those buildings down, and ultimately, what's gonna happen to them? What are we talking about, demo, or what are we looking at? What are we talking about, costs and all of that? Then I guess the next step is, if that's gonna happen, then how does that?
First, we gotta be able to get stuff to it to demo it, so we gotta fix the bridge next year.
We could actually go around the high school with that type of equipment not loaded.
Okay.
And that was gonna be my next question. I know at the White House, you give us numbers for renovation or replacement. Do you have numbers for each building as far as demolition?
We do not, but we could get those to you.
It would probably be good for us to know for planning.
Yep.
Mr. Carroll.
I agree, but again, if these two buildings are gonna be abandoned, there's no rush on that.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
They're not going anywhere.
So as far as the gas, you want We Energies to shut all that down too?
To those buildings?
Yes.
To begin to see, I would say yes.
So that'll have to be a contact that'll have to be made, and then have them come out and shut it. I don't know where their stops are at outside, but there's gotta be something outside other than the meter. I would think they've gotta have one farther out.
Oh, I think right now it's a meter though.
Right.
Meter and lock
For
it.
right now, but they can lock it, but.
Yeah, that's what we would recommend. Again, especially you certainly don't want to in a building like that where you're not going to be in it, you don't want a gas leak. So yeah, if they can lock out the meter and if they could, again, shutting it off upstream of that before it even gets to the building is a better idea and a better plan. So totally head in the right direction with that.
Mr. Gill.
For those of us that like to see things, I wonder if we could do a tour and actually look at those buildings. I don't know how many of you have been in them, but I have not seen them in a long time, but I think it'd be worthwhile to see what we're giving up on. And, you know, and then maybe there's, who knows, if somebody's got some creative solution that we're not imagining, that it'd be great to at least open it up for people to check them out and see what it is. And if it's so hopeless, okay, but like I say, I don't know that's the case. I like hearing what our architect and engineers say, but I can say, I think it's worthwhile to actually see that.
We did just get detailed condition reports on each of the buildings today. And Candace is gonna put that out so everybody has access to it. These are like 50, yeah. Multiple pictures of everything in the reports and everything. So that is available to us now. That could help a little bit. It's not the same as a tour, no. But
And we have done several over the time, and I'm happy to take you out there and walk you through.
It would be great if we invited people in to see this, you know. I think it would be great to invite our community and to say, hey, these are our buildings, these are your buildings, basically, and we're talking about permanently shutting them down, and this is why, and let's, you know, come in and see what you think.
Worry about liability.
but we can certainly look at ways we can make information available to folks, even if we can't take them out there physically, at least to say.
Well, I would say that's why we had the community meeting that we had. That's why we brought in the experts, was because we needed to know the actual condition, because walking through them and having that view, you think, oh, you know, there's this could use an update and that could use an update, but when you get into the bones and the structure, that's where the costs are. That's why we are doing the study, and that's why we've kept the community in the loop on the study and opened these meetings up to make sure that anyone who's interested could get the information. Because again, if you look at the replacement cost, if you look at, it's astronomical.
And maybe we need to have another public meeting to go through the more detailed information of these two particular buildings and why we're thinking it's best to write them off.
Well, and maybe in January, when we're talking about having another kind of community meeting in January, and that might be a great opportunity for us to educate the community on why we made the decision that we did. And give them that information as well. Might be a good opportunity. But I'll take you out there anytime you want to go.
I'd like to offer you too. I do commercial demolition. I kind of know where the rubble would go, where the steel would go. If it helps you to come up with some numbers, I'd be glad to work with you.
Insurance companies, our insurance company is going to have safety requirements. Does that have to do with if we bring other people into the building, or? Not sure what the context of that question is. Is that Dean that's asking you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dean, we see your question. Would you be able to give us a little more, unmute and talk to us?
We would need power on the old side for the IT.
Yeah, talking about Melbourne Hall.
That was part
Oh.
earlier. Are the
Second
insurance companies going to have safety requirements is the question. And we're just trying to figure out in the context of what.
Oh, just worried about even the closed buildings. Yeah, if we're gonna close a building, I'm sure insurance companies will require us to secure it so that nobody can get into it and things like that, so.
Make it safe, yep.
That does bring up a question. We would have to notify our insurance company like if we shut these buildings down. We're gonna want to pull insurance off.
Well, we still wanna have them covered in case.
Coverage.
Yeah,
Well, but I mean, like, they're gonna say, well, we can't cover you for water damage, you shut the water off. I mean, I can see liability, but I'm just wondering what insurance company is gonna say, you shut off the fire alarm, you shut off the water. how do you expect us to cover you for that?
Oh, we can check on that.
Yeah, that's probably a good thing to check on. If they are covered for fire insurance, but we turn off an alarm system and say, well, you shut it off, we're not covering it. Still questions about whether they could safely get a fire truck across the bridge.
So-
Fights.
Well, that was the other question. Do you want the alarm, if all the electrical in those two buildings shut off, because that means the alarm system and everything?
I think we'd want to keep the alarm system active.
That would be the only two that you would still want those two active.
I would think so. If something did happen in that building when it's not occupied.
Right.
You know, we don't want to
Everything
burn
else-
because there's an
everything
orange
else-
glow on the horizon.
Just want to make sure.
If there's no alarm system, don't worry about it. You can
Right.
mothball it.
Yes.
So it was our understanding that, the department could not go out and take a tour. It was the tour of the buildings limited to county board supervisors.
I think the question was asked at the time in the context of like looking at contents and things like that, and that's not what we're talking about doing here. We're talking about the two buildings that we want to discontinue use of and the condition of those buildings. I think it's two different purposes, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Other questions? Randy, thank you for the work you're going to do.
Randy, if there's any consolation with that, and RD can speak to this in better detail if need be, but I think with building B and building C, that they are, it is not like the gymnasium or the cafeteria where you've got wet stuff, plumbing all over that building. Building D, it's really just boom, right there in the center of that building, maybe in the arts room, I'm trying to recall, but none of the classrooms have water. So it is a kind of a contained area in building B as it is with building C. It's that corner where the restrooms and the janitor's rooms are, and then maybe a water cooler here or there that might have to be maintained. So I'm just trying to make lemonade here for you.
Correct. I've been out there this week 3 or 4 times already and working on that stuff and just trying to get it in my head where I need to be and what I need to do. Come down to it. And that's exactly what it is. The water is right there on both sides of the bathroom. Bathrooms on both sides of the water where it comes in. Everything is contained in those little mechanical rooms. So it's not like I have to go put it across the building and so on and so forth. So it's all contained in one area.
Yeah.
In both buildings.
It's not a fun decision to have to make, but.
Gotta be done.
Yeah.
So what's the next step? What do we need?
Need any official action on this?
No,
I think
we
we've
have
given
direction.
to our maintenance staff on what we're doing.
Shut it down.
Reported to the board last night what we were looking at doing, so maybe just a follow-up email to the board then after we start executing this, that, yeah, this is what we went ahead with.
Okay.
So everybody else on the board knows. Any other winterization questions? Are we set for like snow control and stuff like that out there this winter?
We're gonna have a meeting on
We already
that.
did. We had to say while you were busy. You forgot about it. You missed the meeting today.
Why didn't someone tell me?
You were on the Tyler meeting.
So not so much forgot about it, otherwise
No, it's
occupied.
just usually double and triple book, that's why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everything went well?
Yeah, the snow removal's all, we got it all planned.
all
We got it all
planned.
figured out. We got a schedule figured out.
Good.
Billing and everything, so.
Awesome,
Thank you.
wonderful.
So let's move on then to space needs analysis presentation from Venture Architects.
Yes, okay, and with this, we just would like a little bit of direction from the committee because the space needs before we present, and I'll turn it over to Brian here in 1 second, but so the amount of detail that we can go into and are prepared to go into deals with a lot of the principal pieces that are at the downtown campus that would need a highly specialized solution for the needs that they have. And I will use as a for example that would be including but not limited to the jail, the sheriff's office, the judicial area, we'll say the courts, DA, clerk of courts, things like that. Is that something that you would like us to get into the detail of in this meeting for the Campus Reconfiguration Committee, or is that something that is best suited for another committee or possibly a presentation to the board for that level of information?
I think in detail, we'll get to that. If we could approach this similar to we did with the campus property, where we start with the high level view, and then we can drill down at future meetings.
Okay, we can certainly do that then. And it's just recognizing that what we want to do is provide the county with the best and most accurate information for making the best decisions as to what departments do we have, what departments need space, and is there space at the campus that they could go to, and then ask the question, does that make sense to have them out there? And then or the other part of that question, or another part of that question could be, are they okay in the space they have, and do we just need to reconfigure that space? Because that, I'll say as a spoiler alert, is one of the items that we found out as part of this process. So I'll leave it with that, and I think by kind of high level addressing, yes, the jail has pretty significant space needs. There are some pretty significant, I'll say general space needs for the judicial component of the county, and neither of those can be really solved by anything that's currently out on the campus. Those are highly specialized buildings that need to be there for the functions that those departments serve. So then that leaves us then with a smaller amount of departments that we can really focus on. And with that, I'll let Brian share his screen and the information that we've collected to date.
I'm hoping I can share it. It's not giving my tab option, but
he's just working through with WebEx the share component of that.
Are you all able to see this campus diagram?
Well,
Not yet, no.
we see your view of our meeting right now, but we are seeing your screen. Is this a report?
Yeah.
No, we don't have anything.
We don't have it.
No, I don't have anything.
I'm not sure why.
Do you have that on the network? I could try.
I have it open. I don't know why it's not giving me the option to share this particular screen.
I had that issue once in another meeting as well, and we couldn't get it to work.
Figuring that out, I'm just wondering, is this the point where we, now that we've made decisions with the winterization, is this the point where we want to go back to discuss the scope of, especially as we're getting into space needs?
Before we get any farther than the higher view of this, so yeah.
So I was just wondering if that's something we want to forward on to the next agenda, maybe. I don't know what this one is like.
I think we can get the high view from them, and then that, I think, are jumping off point to come back to the board and say, all right, now we need to start talking about this. At that point, they may become, while they will be intertwined, if we're looking at, say, Will Hall, for example, they could become two separate conversations because we have demolition to do, but then we have other planning to do for perhaps a whole different space that's not even the campus. So
Right, we had just talked about potentially like expanding the committee or changing the scope of it.
We're just shifting the documents to another computer to try to troubleshoot this to get these to share correctly. So thank you for your patience with that.
I appreciated your initial assessment that the discussion of the jail and sheriff's department space and the courthouse space are such different things that, you know, that's a very big discussion to try to solve those problems. And so what we'll be taking a look at tonight is a different context. This is other spaces that we could, you know, people who need offices and things like that. So.
Yep. Yes. And I think with that, it like if we look at how we sort of set up our meetings with the departments, and that if we had like 4 different groups that we were meeting with, that really takes it down two of them down, because then it would leave essentially everything that is across the street in the county services building, all of those departments, and then really the remaining non-judicial, non-law enforcement departments that are in your building currently. So we can, let me try what we've got. I've got something up. See if I can share. All right. Oop. Can we see it?
See it now.
Well, it looks like a spreadsheet kind of thing. Okay.
I think I didn't have permissions.
Okay, then I think he has one more here that I'm going to bring up. Yes, okay. We're good. This is what you're going to start with, Brian, right?
Yeah, actually, why don't we start with
the other one?
Yeah, the program summaries.
Okay.
So just to give a little background information on work that's been done to date. So in parallel with the campus reconfiguration effort.
Before you get too far, would you be able to zoom this a little bit so it's a little easier to read? Chance? Thank you. Much better. Thank you.
Awesome. We were working on a parallel effort directly related to the campus reconfiguration, but this one focused on essentially the space needs and requirements of the county services on the downtown campus. And we solely looked at space needs and what's required for each of these departments to work. Not only in their current state, but also in a ideal state, and what they need in terms of just minimum spaces and room types that they need to do their jobs. So what you're seeing here is part of that effort. We created some spreadsheets where we gathered information. We met with all the department representatives and gathered information on numbers of personnel that they have, the spaces that they have and operate in. And we also asked them essentially what are the minimum things that you are currently lacking in your current space that you would need added or expanded upon to work better. The final column on this spreadsheet is if we were to look at this as a new building, looking at these departments and best practices and what we feel is needed for these various departments to operate in today's world. What does that look like from a overall square footage standpoint in terms of a new building? We certainly aren't talking about building a new facility at this point, so that column is grayed out. But it really helps us to give a good snapshot of a comparative analysis between square footage that's available today and what we would see as being needed for an ideal situation. Any questions about that process or what I just explained?
Questions here in the room, so.
Okay, so the first building we looked at, we divided it into essentially looking at each building on campus, what departments were housed in those particular buildings, and met with those departments in those buildings and came up with these documents. So the first one you see here is Health and Human Services. This is actually in the building across the street from the main campus. Currently, you see the existing column there. That's the spaces that currently exist within that space that are occupied by various departments. And that's compared against a recommended square footage. So what we would typically see for typical office sizes or other support spaces that are needed in a typical situation like this. At the bottom, we did sort of a comparison of what the actual square footage available for this particular existing building, and that's the number you see on the bottom there, the 25,340. So that's the space within the exterior walls that's available for all of these departments to exist. And then we compared that against if we, for example, cleared out all of the existing spaces, kind of started from scratch with the existing footprint. We do add a grossing factor to account for things like circulation between departments and support spaces and mechanical spaces. And what we found is if this building was reconfigured in an ideal world, we actually do have a surplus of space at the end of the day of about 4,000 square feet and change. So the good news on this particular building is it does have some capacity if we were to look at a complete reconfiguration of the current spaces to fit other departments within the footprint of this current building. And that's the number you see on the bottom there in terms of the difference between those two square footages. Any questions regarding this particular building?
So on there, I see you got, all of them are fairly close numbers, except I see MIS IT from 2,000 square feet to 600. I can't quite read it. Are you counting their training area and stuff in that too? Because that's a drastic drop for what they.
Yes, in our discussions with them, they said that the area that they're putting claim to anyway is much more than they're actually in need of. So that's where the biggest discrepancy lied in terms of what they actually need for space.
This is Barb. I don't remember that conversation.
Weird, because that's a training area that I remember that was used.
Yeah, I don't really think that's quite the conversation I would have had.
Because we had talked about, maximum number of people you had in those training sessions, and it was fairly low. It wasn't a huge number. So, and we really weren't accounting for all the rest of the space in that floor plan. So,
okay. Yeah, the hallway that's in the white there isn't ours. And I was gonna say where it comes out all the way to the end is not ours. That's just hallway. Yeah, that's not ours either. And it doesn't go all the way to the windows. The back row against, oh, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Sorry.
So what you see on the screen, the blue is what you had originally indicated to us, the current space that you occupy in some capacity. It sounded like there was a good deal of room that wasn't being fully utilized. Perhaps this needs to be revisited, but that's the impression I think we got as a group. And I don't know if you're in a position to comment on this additional square footage over here, the 900 square feet, in terms of what that's being utilized for.
It's used for meetings, and I mean, we're using it probably 4 to 5 times a week. Could you cut that and take part of it? Yeah, but not all of it. I mean, because that's where all the IT training is. And now that we're going to be doing training for literally every employee, I don't know how much of that we want to cut out.
Okay. We can certainly make a note of that.
And it doesn't affect anything. We still have a surplus of square footage. So if you are, I don't want to say reclaiming it, we add that back into yours, we're still, I mean, the topic is you still have abundance of space for all of the departments.
Correct. So, so really, what we're trying to get at with this analysis is your overall, an overall snapshot of what you have currently available for overall space. So, if we were to reconfigure this building, it does have some surplus of space to accommodate other departments if we feel like any departments from the existing buildings across the street want to relocate to this location. Similarly, we can probably go to the next, if there are no other further questions on that.
This is just jail, so we'll move on to the next one, which is administration.
Yeah. So we did this with all departments. The other one we look closely at is county services and administration. This is primarily on the top floor of the sheriff and jail building. This one, looking at your existing spaces and what you, at a minimum, need to operate more efficiently, we are looking at a bit of a deficit in terms of overall square footage to accommodate your current needs. This doesn't take into account the possibility of reconfiguring and gaining some space in terms of sharing some of those program spaces, such as common lobby spaces or entries into each department. Those could certainly be shared and reduce some square footage for those shared spaces. So, so I think this is looking pretty favorable as well to meet your current needs in terms of what you are lacking in some of those spaces. So I think with some creative reconfiguration, I think we can get this particular floor to operate better with the current available space.
And Brian, for just the point here, if we look at county administrator, that's a fairly significant increase from 1,400 square feet to almost 3,000 square feet. But the point with that is the in the recommended space, mm-hmm. that under the county administrator, in the way that the calculation is being put together, that's including the county boardroom, correct?
Correct.
So yeah. There are just to give the committee a little bit more insight into, so why would the county administrator need that much room? Candace was not throwing elbows around saying, by the way, you're going to give me a lot more space with this. This is including the county boardroom, but it also is including some conference rooms that are currently not a part of any of those spaces up there. There's like a department may have a conference room table, but there isn't like a private conference room that one might need to have for HR purposes or possibly training purposes on the actual courthouse block. So that is the reasoning why that square footage that's identified as existing for county administrator is far greater for the recommended.
Kyle?
Yeah.
The other thing I'm noticing, so that has land and zoning in it. So are you then, would you be proposing to move all of the people from the first floor up and integrate them within the third floor? Or is that reconfiguring that space on the first floor as well? I'm just trying to get a kind of a sense of a vision here.
This would ideally bring them up to this floor as well.
Okay.
Yes, as Kyle was saying, so this looks at taking some of those space needs, for instance, people who are currently in open office settings and giving them a private office, which is more appropriate for the work they do. So you'll see some significant increases in square footage just because obviously, private offices are a little less efficient than open office plans, but in a lot of cases necessary for people to do their jobs in an appropriate manner. So that's why you're seeing the uptick in square footage to accommodate some of these current needs. Any other questions on this one?
Guess not.
And then the last sheet with this would be the judicial suite. And as we had discussed earlier, we can just quickly look at this and just sort of see what some of those values are relative to what is existing and really what would be recommended and really where that's a pretty significant number change with that.
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to this. One is ideal state, which is that recommended. So there's a lot of things that we like to see in terms of current standards and recommendations and requirements for the court system and how they operate in terms of security and designated corridors that don't currently exist with your current facility. Toilet rooms that need to be included as part of this for jury deliberation rooms and private chambers for the judge. So, so that is indeed recommended state. So there is a significant deficit according to today's standards. That is not to say that we couldn't accommodate some of the deficiencies in terms of safety and access and ADA requirements in the existing building with some smaller, less significant changes that could probably go a long way with how they operate in a more efficient manner. So, so obviously there is a huge deficit in terms of overall square footage, but the needs that they shared with us, I think we could accommodate a lot of those just with reconfiguration of their current space.
Yeah, to piggyback on Brian's statement, I think what we found in talking with the judge and the DA and the clerk of courts is and recognizing Wisconsin Supreme Court ruling 68, which really is our guidelines for the that lay out the recommendations for designers in the design of or what is expected by the Wisconsin State Supreme Court for a new circuit court courtroom. And I think the big takeaway here is what Richland County has is both from an operational standpoint, from a safety standpoint, and a compliance with SCR 68. It's nowhere near hitting any of those marks. And a new court type facility should be on the horizon for Richland County, but we also recognize that that is a major cost component for great consideration. So in taking that into consideration, as Brian had said, we recognize that there can be a number of tweaks to the existing courtroom that can really alleviate a lot of the concerns that we heard from the judge and the DA and the clerk that could happen within the existing courtroom. Can we get restrooms for the jury when they're in deliberation? That's a pretty major piece that we would have to come to that consideration at that time. because it is a major infrastructure piece in a very old building. But a lot of the pieces that are safety related really could be managed with some reconfiguration in that existing courtroom. Anything, plans?
Yeah, we can, what might be helpful is to actually look, we also, as part of this exercise, did these plan diagrams to help illustrate where these departments lie. And if you want to go to I think the next couple of slides are the county jail and sheriff's building, which we really didn't focus too much on this evening, but I think the next slide is the administrative floor. So as we mentioned before, the county boardroom is included in the square footage for this floor. So that's why you're seeing that higher number there. So again, just supporting the data that we had come up with, illustrating this in the current situation that you have. And it sounded like, from what Kyle shared, a little bit of reconfiguration has occurred already to accommodate some of those means. So I think there's an ability to, even with your current situation, creatively accommodate some of these current needs that you have. Any other specific questions on what we shared? And we can share this via PDF after the meeting as well.
That would be good, thank you. Questions?
Well, our jail, does that conform or meet current standards? And maybe we need to talk about a judicial center, including a jail. Is there any thought process there? Have you gone down that avenue yet?
We have the data for a new justice facility, where that is, and obviously it comes down to what that cost is, and what Richland County can afford. We do in the master plan would have that documentation of what the area and the square footage that would be required for a new facility as such. But also keep in mind with this, we're trying to, knowing that could be a lengthy process. That decision obviously isn't going to be made lightly. It's not going to be made tonight or tomorrow. That would take some time, and what those costs would be, in the future. But also trying to accommodate some maybe minor renovation work to at least alleviate until you get to that process to do a new facility.
I'd like to see that figure out there.
Okay.
Even though it's blue sky, I'd like to see what that would cost us.
I know you had given us some just very ballpark kind of estimates on a replacement facility, and that exceeded our borrowing capacity, but I don't know if you still have those numbers handy or if you'd have to dig those up.
Yeah, that was part of the assessment, the replacement of basically this entire block, and I'm trying to remember what that, without having it.
I recall it was north of 80 million.
Yeah, I think it was in that ballpark.
Yeah, I believe that's what it was around.
And that literally, Dave, that's literally taking all of your services that you currently have on the block that you are on right now with the courthouse and building that new somewhere else. So that would be not HHS, but that would be all county administrator, register of deeds, clerk, and all of that. So
New government center.
Government center.
Keep in mind too, is when we do these master plans, and typically what's done in some of the other counties, let's just say the law enforcement center would kind of be built first if you did this in phases. And then a lot of times the judicial portion would be like the second floor of that, like essentially on top of the law enforcement center. And then potentially other county government could go out there like in the third phase onto that. So that's kind of master plan for a whole new facility. And we definitely will include that into this.
And that's not to say that we've not, Sheriff Clay had shared with us some drawings that were done. I'm trying to recall when they were, but I'm failing. But it was
12 years ago.
Okay, for a jail pod in the existing parking lot, and we've looked at could that option work, and how would that work with the existing operations, everything we've heard relative to the space needs, and the real big challenge, while that solves many of the matters that are inherent with the current jail, what it is not solving is the secure transfer of any defendants from the jail to the courts. And that's really one of the bigger parts of this puzzle is having the courts accessible to the jail, so any defendants can very securely be moved from the jail to the courts when they need to appear, without having to do or be concerned with any level of transportation in a vehicle, as that is creates a far higher risk of safety, of escape, of many things for both inmates and staff. So how does that all look? And as Corey had mentioned before, a lot of that is this phased approach of, okay, let's get law enforcement here, so we have jail and sheriff's office, and then all of that is planned out and laid out, so you can just literally put that court system right on top, and then through moving people vertically, you can get that secure component of getting a defendant from the jail into the courts with no issue.
Yeah, designing a justice center, as Kyle was mentioning, there's we tried. You want to design it so there's four separate ways. You want public separate from judicial staff, from jury, as well as people in custody. So those are 4 paths. And then when you master plan, you want to make sure that you accommodate each one of those as separate paths getting into the courtroom.
From day one.
From day one.
Yeah.
Putting we looked at the concept for putting a new jail pod in the parking lot. As Kyle's mentioned, there's other complications to that. One thing that we haven't mentioned, as well as that's quite a bit of parking that you'd be taking up. And obviously that's always a concern as well in a government center.
So as part of that, with the master plan, when that initial draft gets presented, it will take a lot of considerations into, okay, if we build X, target X in 5 years, but X does not include Y, we recognize that there will be transportation between X and Y. I don't know why I'm saying X and Y. We can say law enforcement and courts. That didn't make sense after I started explaining it. So say in 5 years or 10 years or whatever, and this goes related to county bonding and borrowing, what that target date ends up being. But maybe that's where I needed my X. In X amount of years is law enforcement center, and then in Y amount of X plus Y is full justice center, where courts get put out there. And in that delta between the X and Y is recognizing that the sheriff's office will have an increase of transports for any person in their care, back and forth from the jail to the courts, which would still remain downtown in the existing courthouse. So how does that work? How does that cost? Because that's an operational cost. And we're aware that that's an operational cost that can't be put against borrowing. So how then can the county plan for that, for the cost of transportation in that interim between X and Y of getting to that justice center and having that fully built out? So that's the piece where we'll need some additional information on relative to the borrowing and that to be able to find out sort of what those target dates would be in terms of planning that out for the master plan.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Brewer.
But you talk about transportation. Let's say that the next time the jail inspector comes here to Richland County and he or she says, I'm going to red tag this operation. We've got too many faults here. So then we're talking about paying for the warehousing of our inmates in another county. And then the transportation costs really jump, transporting those inmates from Lancaster would be an obvious thing, or Veropa. I think we've got to mention that in this analysis, because I know that the last several inspections, it's been kind of a wink, and I know you guys are trying and you're doing really well with what you've got, but what you've got is inadequate.
That's, yeah, so when we start getting into designing a jail, we work with the Department of Corrections, and you have Nathan White as the inspector. We've worked with Nathan, and we are currently on a number of projects. Typically, as long as you're working towards resolving, they're not going to typically shut you down or anything like that and saying you got to do this. And then talking with Nathan already about your facility, the sheriff's doing the best and his staff is doing the best they can with what they have. But moving forward, you're correct. In the future, your jail population balloons in a year or two. Obviously, that's a different discussion. But moving forward, we get those resolved, and the Department of Corrections usually works with the counties. And I want to say they get a little patient, knowing that you're leading towards a resolution.
Yeah. And as Corey said, that population could increase, or that population could stay what it is, but the demographic changes. And that could really throw a fairly significant monkey wrench into how jail staff has to classify everybody within the confines of your physical space, which then could require some level of transport to another county for that. But as Corey had said, if Richland County is working with a professional and the DOC is in the loop on that, their patience is expanded quite a bit because they recognize you're working towards that end result of resolving the major issue that's there.
And they understand the cost impacts to a county when you start talking about new facility.
Yes.
So yeah, they just get patient, and as long as you're moving forward to something, and that he's aware of that you are in early discussions, they don't usually red flag you and say shut you down or cut half your beds for some reason and tell you that you got to ship everyone out. So I think you're right where you need to be with what you have as far as early discussions in a new facility.
Yes, and one other point to that relative to their patients, they also have a very clear recognition relative to the amount of time that it takes to both plan, design, and document a new jail facility much less than take those documents and have them go out, bid and built, because that can be upwards to a 5-year process. And they recognize that. And when we're talking patients, they're there for that entire time because they're aware of that.
If you told us today to build you a new facility tomorrow, to start tomorrow, you probably won't be getting into that for at least 3+ years. Just to kind of put that in perspective.
Other questions?
At one time, it looked as if virtual court proceedings would be a salvation. But I understand there's a pushback now on that because of the rights of individuals to, face their accuser, et cetera, et cetera. So that hasn't borne fruit, the virtual part of it.
We've heard that at the Public Safety Committee that people are asking to be transported from prisons to make their court appearances, and so our staff are spending a lot of time on the road.
Yep. Yeah, it's their right to request that to be in person, and some of them use that.
It's a fun car ride.
Yeah. And that's not to say that new facilities are not including or no longer including the capacity for virtual court hearings or anything like that. That is the case. And because a lot of, even if an actual court case is handled in person, a lot of those pretrial hearings are handled virtually and quite honestly can be handled within a jail pod. And that does make a major benefit of that. But yes, we all have a constitutional right to be present in face of our accuser, and we do still need to provide that.
Questions?
So this is the slippery slope relative to space needs analysis and master planning, because it can go really, really quick astray from campus discussion when we're talking about sizes and that. But it's very beneficial conversation that it is great that many of the board members and the campus reconfiguration committee are hearing, to be aware, and in a way sort of validating a lot of what it sounds like, a lot of the items that you've heard already.
We appreciate the high level overview, and we definitely need to get back with our full board and talk about, okay, who really needs to be involved in the discussion and what we're discussing from this point, separate from dealing with, clearing out our campus buildings and things like that. So. Right. Well, thank you very much for the information. We'll look forward to the document you're sending us to.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just general, I was wondering for any future documents or slide presentations, if we could get a PDF beforehand, so we could look at that on our screens. The screen is a little hard to read, and it's helpful to be a little more prepared.
Yes, we will work to achieve that with our next meeting. We apologize. We work in such short notice with that for this meeting.
Hey, thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, discussion and possible action update on inventory of campus items and associated costs.
Okay, so as you know, we did get a quote. It was upwards of $155,000. So we are going to look into speaking with a couple of local auction firms, I do believe, if that is still the wishes of this committee. We have not done that yet. Obviously, we've been a little busy with the winterization piece, and at this point, I don't know that it's anything we'll want to tackle until spring as it sits, just with the weather being the way it is, Randy.
Okay, with that in mind, the winterization from those two buildings, is there anything of that, of those buildings that need to be moved
to other buildings? Because if that's gonna go into cold storage, is there anything from those two buildings you want moved?
We should probably go out there and walk around. I mean, anything,
Is there- we don't
the
want it to be
mechanical
damaged
stuff.
that-
any of the computer stuff, you know, we should probably get Barb and Jason.
Cause that
and-
classroom building's got quite a few computers in it.
That's what I mean, and then I know that the one, set up in the library is something that we're looking at using for virtual court. So I wanna make sure that that doesn't get damaged, things like that, so I think we'll have to get with Barb and Jason and,
Because that stuff will have to get moved before we do the inventory or before this all
Yep.
gets shut down.
yep.
Where we stand with that? Any other questions on?
Yeah, so the inventory and then an auction, there are auction houses that come in and do the auction, inventory and do the auction. I see
Yes.
this was going to Wisconsin auctions.
There are, and that's what we're looking
Oh,
to do,
okay.
is find a local firm that will come in and they'll just kind of inventory as they auction, they kind of do it all.
Right,
And
and they just take a cut.
And they just take a cut. They take a percentage and that's really all there is to it. And that way, that would give us, you know, these winter months to get all of the desks relocated that we want to get relocated, the chairs, all of those items. And then give MIS an opportunity to go through and look at all of the equipment, see what's viable for them. We haven't, again, nobody's been allowed out there, so we haven't let them go and see those items or go through anything. So this would give us an opportunity to make sure they can check on all of that and figure that out too.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on that issue? Then item 9 is discussion and possible action to set future meeting dates. When do we next wish to meet?
Need anything before the next county board, and we do.
That's December 10th,
Right, that's early. So
right?
And do we want another meeting before we have the discussion with county board about the makeup of our and scope of our committee?
I don't know if we need one because we're just kind of dropping it back in their lap to say, we got it this far, now what do you want?
what meeting do we do that at, December or January?
I think the December meeting is on.
Hopefully it'll be a shorter agenda anyway.
We can hope. I don't know, have a decision, how we work the December meeting, but we can certainly talk about it and see if we can,
And they may simply say, keep doing it until we change our mind.
that's a possibility. So do we want to have a December meeting?
Not unless something that come up that we need to address.
Okay, well, then we could leave it at that, that we will plan to meet for December. We'd look at having a January meeting then, once we get past first of the year. And unless we need to meet for a specific purpose, then we can call a special meeting.
I wonder if we could set up a tour for supervisors, like, they would like to go in and see it, and maybe.
You can work with the
Department
administrator
heads
on that.
would be,
Just work with me directly.
I'm just saying for other supervisors might want to also.
We can mention that at the county board meeting.
Yep. Mention it at the board.
So as far as the January date, I don't know if we want to pick that up tonight or just look at when it would be like second week of January sometime. Around our other meetings that we already have on regular schedules.
Like Wednesday,
Wednesday night, see-
January.
I have to reschedule my driver's ed, which I can do.
Okay,
if I-
well, hopefully we'll give you enough lead time that won't be a problem.
I know this.
Yep. Just,
And since next week, it's meeting Thursday night. then we're looking at stuff 15.
so if we looked at like Wednesday, January 8th or Wednesday, January 15th, those dates. It doesn't conflict with another meeting we've got going on. Again, we don't have to determine that right now, just to give you a heads up that those would be 5 o'clock meeting time work, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's what we target future or correspondence. Correspondence, do we have any future agenda items?
I heard we figured 150,000, that's what we figured we'd get out there. And
No, that was an estimate for a professional firm to come in and do an inventory.
Which not sure we even have that much out there.
Yeah, you subtract a 0 or 2 is probably what we have out there.
I'd be surprised to have that much out there.
Maybe look at that an old fashioned auction where people
Yeah.
show up and probably only a firm I know around here.
There's a lot of it.
Yep, and they do online stuff too, so it would be both, and that would hopefully maximize whatever little bit of profit you might
It might
get.
be all the way up to $1.50.
Wilkinson would sell everything in their yard at Muscadet, and Randy could haul it all down.
Yeah.
Any future agenda items specifically we want to have? Otherwise, it'll be updates and stuff like that. So depending on what direction we get from the board. All right. Item number 12, looking for a motion to adjourn. I gotta make that motion. Mr. Carroll moves to adjourn. Second by Supervisor Glassbrenner. All those in favor? Aye. You're adjourned. Thank you.
Good effort.
Yeah.
Last week, she